Hello there, I'm just gonna quickly go over the Chronos slow motion camera and just kind of talk about it and then just kind of get you up and running with it. So first off, let's go over the documentation. So in the box, you're given a certificate of quality. This is just saying that your camera meets the specs in terms of the frame rate that they are mentioning. You also get a quick start guide. So in here, you kind of just, there's not so much a quick start guide, just as a product manual. You get kind of different charts and resolutions, just so you can kind of quickly get up to speed on the camera. And then finally, you get the manual. This is a super important piece, and I would just keep it within arm's reach while you're uncomfortable with the camera. There's a lot of useful information in here, and it kind of helps you get going. So there's the documentation. Let's go ahead and head back to the camera. So just quick overview of the camera. We have the screen. We have a control knob that also clicks in. On the top, we have power button, status LED for charging. And so that'll tell you if it's charging, if it's fully charged. Also tell you the battery status when you're running on battery. You have an arm light, so this is your arm button. You click that and it'll arm the camera, and that'll be shown right there. And then once you trigger the camera, then it'll do whatever you've programmed it to do. You have two mounting holes right here. This is just a 1/4-20 thread, standard tripod mount. And then up here, SD card. Moving over here, we have our I/O. So we have full-size HDMI port for preview. We have an eSATA port for sending data, firmware update port, GPIO port, power. So the power cable is just a regular power cable. Let's get all that in here. So it just unplugs, and then you plug it into the wall, and then this goes into here, into the power barrel plug, and you're good to go. So that's that taken care of. Gigabit port, so this will help you to control the camera over LAN, which is super cool features there. Your primary trigger, your other two triggers are over here. This is your primary trigger, then you got headphone and microphone. Moving to the front, there's not too much here, but there's also a lot going on. You have your fan and your ventilation holes, kind of down in here. Make sure you don't cover those up, and they're always able to breathe. This thing gets quite hot, and so just want to be mindful of that. And then we have the lens, which we'll go over in just a sec. And then on the bottom, we have another mount. Over here, we also have another mount. This is a very useful mount for a lot of different things that you may do. Okay, on the bottom, we have our final mount, and then we have the battery drawer, which just comes out. This is just a standard battery, and you can just slot it in there. Make sure it goes all the way in. If you look closely, there are some pins in there. You just want to make sure that the pins on the battery line up with that. So once it goes all the way in, should close nice and easily like that. Sweet. All right, let's go ahead and head to the front of the camera. So on the front of the camera, we're just going to take this lens off. This is unlike other cameras. This is a CS mount lens, so it screws. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and unscrew the lens. Now, one thing that will happen when you do that, as you see this, this screw down in here. This is the back focus adjustment. That is just a way to adjust the focus of the lens. It's kind of used in the calibration steps, but it is a little bit finicky. So the whole thing does kind of lock together once you put the lens on, and you may need to use some pliers to kind of get into there and just gently hold that while you unscrew the lens. So it's not coming off right now, but you would be able to get in there and screw off the lens. In the box, you get these. So this is the eye cap for the lens. So that would just go on the lens once you've taken it off. This is the lens cap for the lens, and then this is the body cap for the camera. and that would just kind of replace the lens when the lens is not on the camera. Sweet. All right, next up, we have all of the adjustments on the lens. So another part of the calibration process is kind of lining the lens up, and that can be a little finicky and take a little bit, but kind of the overview. This is the focus ring, this is your zoom ring, and this is your aperture ring. Ooh, I have that locked down right there. There's your aperture ring. Now, one thing that you just saw is these are locks, and so one nice thing is you can kind of get this set up and lock the lens down and lock everything down, and then know that this will for sure be on the correct settings when it comes time to record. Sweet. So there's the camera. Let's go ahead and fire that on really quick. So we're just going to hold this down until we kind of get some feedback on the screen. So the screen just lit up. There we go. You'll notice it does a brief fan burst just to check its fan is all good. And then it'll take a couple seconds to load on up. So, all right, so now that we have the camera booted up, we can kind of go over the user interface. Down here we have our battery and the voltage of the battery. Then we have the exposure. This is represented in shutter angle. And so generally, rule of thumb is to keep that at 180. That is the most natural way that we see things. So we can just use this dial or the touchscreen right here to change that to 180. And one interesting thing that happens with this camera is when you adjust the shutter angle, you get these UI elements that kind of create artifacts on the sensor. And so the way we overcome that is every time we adjust the camera, every time we make a change to the camera, we want to do a black shade. And so that can be done simply by taking the lens cap, putting it on the lens, and then coming over here to black cal, and we'll just let that run. It's going to go ahead and reprocess the sensor and kind of set the black levels. And once that's set, you'll notice that line has gone away and we're back to recording normally. Next up, so we have our recording status. We also have our frame rate and resolution right there. Then we have the utility. So this is kind of just the main settings of the camera. We have, all these settings in here that we can kind of go through. Usually we don't need to touch that. We're more interested in these settings up here. We have our focus aid, which will draw red outlines on things when it's in focus. It's nice. It's just a helpful tool. We have play button. So if we record something, we can play through and save files to the SD card. And then we also have a white balance. So right up here, we can change white balance. Generally, probably safe to leave it on 5600 Kelvin. That's for when you're outside. When you come inside, you can change that to 4600 Kelvin, just kind of for fluorescent lights, but we'll just keep it on 56 for now. You can also set custom white balance and the color matrix, but we don't need to worry about that. Next up is the black calibration. You saw I just used that to kind of reset the sensor. Trigger I/O settings. So this is for all three of the triggers that we have. Once again, we have a trigger right here, and then we have two of them right here. This is our primary trigger. And so continuing, we can just kind of go through here. These kind of get granular, so you can read more about it in the manual or just do some experimentation, but it should just work out of the box. Next up is the most important menu. These are recording settings. In here we have our common resolutions. I would suggest just using this menu. If you do want to get really granular, you're able to kind of change all of that in this section right here, but I would just recommend using these. So let's go all the way up to the top. There we go. And so we get a preview right here of how much of the sensor window we're using. And so you can see as we change resolutions, it changes how much of that sensor we're using. That's just how it's able to record high frame rate. So that's the kind of the main thing you're going to use in this menu. You're also going to use trigger delay. So we'll go into there. Trigger delay allows you to set the behavior of the trigger. And so we can see here we have the pre-record delay, pre-trigger delay, and post-trigger delay. There's little things down there, but basically this is how long, so if you press the trigger, how long it'll take until it starts recording. So you can say press the trigger and then 5 seconds later it starts recording. This is the pre-trigger, so this is the time from the start of the recording to the trigger. So if I delayed by 5 seconds, but I want 2-second pre-trigger, that means that I would start recording at 3 seconds. And then we have the post trigger, which is how long it'll continue to record after I press the trigger. And then we also have the buffer up here. So this is how much time we're recording. So let's say, right now it says we can record up to 16.333 seconds. If I want to record more or less than that, we can kind of change the bias between the pre-trigger and the post-trigger. Sweet. So that's that menu. And then recording modes. Nothing really interesting in here, but we can kind of change between different ways to use the trigger and record. So interesting stuff in there to look at. All right, so that's kind of the functionality of the camera. Basically what you do to start recording in slow-mo is you kind of line up the camera, get it lined up. So you can see on the top we have the arm button. This will arm, so now we're recording. And then we can go ahead and press the trigger. I don't have the trigger here, but it would just be plugged into here. The expected behavior would happen, and then we can go ahead and stop recording. Now we can see the play button is highlighted, and we can go to that and we can kind of scroll through the clip that we just recorded, and we can mark the start, we can mark the end, and then we can save that to our SD card, which again is just located right up here. So that's how you save that, and you can save multiple clips. And in terms of playback, you just hold down these left or right arrows right here, and you can see the numbers start counting up. If we want to increase playback speed, we can just go up here to the play rate, and we can reverse and go forward. So that's how we'd use this menu. Sweet, so that just about finishes up the use of this camera. Pretty cool little device. One final thing for turning it off. We're going to go ahead and hold down this button for 0.5 to 4 seconds. We want to make sure we're not holding it for more than 4 seconds, as that will initiate a hard shutoff, which may mess with some of the configuration of the camera. So 1, 2, 3. We've issued that command to the camera, and it's going to go ahead and start shutting off. Sweet. There is the camera. Hopefully that helps.